10 reasons why Texas is so successful. The state of Texas seems to be getting it just right. There should be no question about that on the mind of anyone that understands the United States' economic terrain. Whoever doubts the success of Texas should cast his mind back to 2018, when CNBC named the $1.6 trillion economy state the best for business. Before and ever since then, Texas has continued to attract the headquarters of global companies. The logical question then should be, why is Texas so successful? What is the magic that is positioning the state above others on the scale of success? That is exactly what this video will be uncovering. Relax as we give you some of the 10 reasons why Texas trumps other US economies. 1. The largest exporting state. Perhaps the best place to begin is here. All economists agree on the same thing. The more a state or nation exports, the more economically successful it will be. Texas is known as the top exporting state in the US. It's actually responsible for almost 20% of the total exports of the country, and the export growth continues at an impressive rate. The Dallas Fed once reported that Texas exports at some point were growing at an annual rate of 16%. That was about 3 times faster than the nation's exports, which grew at the rate of 5.2% during the same period. Texas is growing in export owing to its oil and gas industry, according to a report by the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the EIA, on the first oil export by Texas. 2. A manufacturing powerhouse. One can ask logically, what is Texas exporting? Please note that besides oil and gas, which we'll talk about later, Texas is also a manufacturing powerhouse. In a recent year, for example, the total manufacturing output from Texas was $226.16 billion. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, that was about 10% of total manufacturing goods in the whole country. Texas manufacturing supports more than 865,000 jobs in the state, which is about 7.1% of its workforce. The average annual manufacturing compensation was $82,544 compared to $46,642 for all non-farm jobs during that year. This goes a long way in boosting the state's gross domestic product, or GDP. Therefore, at a time the global manufacturing expansion slows, Texas manufacturing continues to grow at a healthy pace. 3. A global oil superpower. Let's tell you a bit more about oil and gas in case you haven't heard about the state's giant strides in the sector. Texas is the #1 oil-producing state in the US. The Lone Star State accounts for more than 40% of national oil output. Isn't that going to be a blessing for the economy of the state? Though we're going to talk more about it, employment in oil and gas has stimulated growth among the state's major sectors. With the crude oil export ban lifted, oil and gas exports have increased from 5.2% of the state's total exports to the largest share of 18%, or $45 billion, over a period of 12 months. Investment bank HSBC also predicted that Texas's oil exports will surpass OPEC members Iran and Iraq soon, and it's almost happening now. The state is poised to become the world's #3 oil producer. By then it would be producing over half of US production. 4. Influx of people. There's no gainsaying the fact that human resources are a driver of a state or a nation's economy. If well managed, a state that is experiencing a population surge has a great opportunity to grow economically. This is the situation in Texas. It's one of the reasons why it's so successful. Everyone just wants to move to Texas for many reasons. We will elaborate on some of those reasons later. People keep moving there and you can't blame them. Consider this. 4 cities in Texas were among the top 10 fastest growing cities in the US in terms of population, according to the Census Bureau. One of the Texan cities on the list is San Antonio, which takes the #1 spot. The city is home to US global investors. If the fastest growing cities in the US are considered by their percentage of increase in population, cities in Texas take half of the top 10 spots. But why are people flocking to Texas? That takes us to the next reason why Texas is so successful. 5. Texas is cheaper. Some people may initially want to contest this. The fact is that big cities can be too expensive for many people to live in. But did you remember that we once talked about huge employment opportunities in Texas? Once employed there, you will discover that your paycheck will go as far as possible. The pay in Houston and many other cities in Texas has dwarfed the cost of living there, unlike the case in many big cities in the country. In a poll about the average incomes in the 51 largest metro areas in the US adjusted for cost of living, 3 Texan areas came in the top 10. In Texas, the cost of living, including consumer prices, transport costs, housing and utilities, is relatively low. 6. Low tax. Still talking about the cost of living, tax is low in Texas. It is reportedly one of 7 states where there is no personal state income tax. According to Tax Foundation research, Texas has the 6th lowest individual tax burden. Of course, the disproportionate take from property taxes hasn't gone down well with homeowners. There are also occasional tax incentives for businesses in the state. This is an important factor responsible for the economic success of the town. 7. Plenty of homes. A couple of seconds ago, we told you about how relatively low the cost of living is and cited housing as an example. In Texas, the land is overall cheaper than elsewhere. Realtors, researchers and other experts say that the state's land acquisition process is very efficient. Dr. Ali Anari, a research economist at the Real Estate Center at Texas A&M University, says, "From the time of getting a building permit right through to the construction of homes, Texas is much quicker than other states." Anari added that there's an abundant supply of land in the state. Fewer regulations and a more friendly government generally create a much better business attitude in Texas than in other states. Meanwhile, the lending rules are strict. This once shielded the state from a nationwide housing market crash. 8. A state with fewer rules. While we would want to disagree with those who describe Texas as laissez-faire, saying there's a lack of regulation in the state, we would say it is liberal in the classic sense. This is apparent in business regulations and city rules. It appears that there's a notion in the classic social contract that the state is not going to do a ton to support you or your business, but they are not going to get in your way. Well, that may not be 100% true in Texas. There's, however, a semblance of that in the state. Rules about mortgage, lending, texting, driving, emails and soda tax are simpler, fewer and friendlier than other states' rules. 9. Plenty of big cities. Here is a very good reason why Texas is so successful. It has plenty of big cities. 6 of the 20 biggest cities in the country are in the state. So to put this in context, contrast this to the case in Illinois, for example. The only city considered big there is Chicago. If you are in Texas, on the other hand, you have an option of choosing your big city from Austin, the capital, Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, or San Antonio. 10. A family-friendly state. Now, what do you make of all the 9 factors mentioned so far? Would you not agree that those factors make Texas a family-friendly state? To cap it all, let's add that the state has been particularly popular with families, thanks in part to its good value housing. Some cities in the state now have an above-average number of children. There are pretty good schools and a reasonable mortgage in Texas. Its restaurants are invariably family-friendly. Though the state has a high dropout rate, its education scores pretty well as students perform well at national tests in 4th and 8th grades in math, science and reading. Thus, it's not at all bad in aggregate. For instance, in 8th grade math, Texas has been scoring higher than the national average, with scores also higher than the 3 other big states of California, Florida and New York. Thus, the perception that Texas has poor schools is not very correct, though Texans would prefer better schools. In your own view, what other factors do you think are responsible for the success of Lone Star State apart from the 10 here? We value your comments, please. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.